nosotros me gustaría también de hacer la presentación en español. Tengo, I think, to switch in English, it's more safe for that. I'm very glad to be here. I would like to thank the university, Judith and Jonas, to invite me and give me this opportunity to share with you a number of concerns about requirement engineering. So we are not so many, so you have, if you have any question during the presentation, so please feel free to ask me, and you know, it's, I can go longer for 4 hours, I can go shorter for 1 hour, so the important is that you get something from the talk. And I think really be free to ask me questions at any time. I have planned also to give you 2 small exercises to do, but I have the correction of them, don't worry. So if you don't want to do it, we will switch immediately to the correction of the exercise. So as you see on this slide, I have organized a presentation in 3 main aspects. One is a short introduction to the field of requirement engineering, and then I will give a little bit more emphasis on the notion of requirement, and I will spend most of my time on an approach which is goal-oriented or objective-oriented, if you want so. So it's named GOR, you can see it in the literature, it means goal-oriented requirement engineering. But I would like to start with some kind of preface and to understand a little bit what is the history for requirement engineering. You know, it's a recent discipline because it's about 10-15 years, and this is very short for a research discipline. You know maybe that we need minimum 12 years for something which has been written in research to be really applied in the professional field. So 10-12 years is the minimum. If you take, for instance, DBMS, when relational database were defined, 71, the first DBMS was 82. You see, it's about 11 years. So it is still a recent discipline, and for this reason, of course, there is a lot of research which is going on, and maybe some of you will dedicate some time in the next year to do research on that topic. So for that preface, I start with something that you know very well, which is the fact that when you have to engineer an information system, this is based, all methodology dealing with this aspect are based on the assumption that the information system is representing some part of the real world, okay? It's a kind of model or image of the real world. And for this reason, the research on information system engineering has been focusing very much on modeling. So we are having today a larger number of models. They were very useful, for instance, to understand the meaning of information, because we can relate any value in a database to something concrete, an entity, a relationship, and attribute something in the real world. So if we generalize what has been happening with information system engineering, we must notice that any time you have an artifact to define, you need to use model. Modeling is the key activity for us, I suppose. And more recently, you know, in software engineering, there is a focus on what is called model-driven engineering or model-driven architecture, which is focusing on this idea that you start with a very conceptual model, high-level model, and then you transform this model into a code. And of course, the assumption is that we can do that almost automatically today. But the question I ask, I am a little bit provocative here. You know all this model, in particular, the result has been that we have plenty of notation with the UML, some of them you recognize on this slide. But my question is, do we have the right model? Or are we missing some very important model to do our job, which is engineering, developing an artifact? which will be used by people in the campaign. Are we getting the right model or not? So what is your opinion? You think we have all the model we need, or there are some which are missing, which are very important? No opinion? My answer will be yes, of course. These are not the right model, at least to do requirement engineering. Why I can say that? Because if I look to a number of surveys with carefully examine what are the results of the work we are doing when we are conducting a project on software development, you know these statistics, which are one project among two is a failure. 30% of the project are never finished. 30% of the project are finally working, but they needed twice the budget which was initially planned, and maybe 3 times the delay which was necessary. One of the first group which did this important survey over, you see white 8,000 projects in the US was a Standish group. This is the first report which was published in 1995. It was called the Chaos, and it was showing plenty of this figure. You have the same result with the survey which was performed in Europe, and the Standish group is repeatedly doing this kind of surveys today. In 2010, you can read on the web the new survey, which is showing that our practices are a little bit well, better, improving, in the sense that maybe the average is 50% of the project are success, but 45% of project is still a failure, which is not sustainable. We cannot continue doing our work like that. Can you imagine if when you build a bridge, 1 time over 2, the bridge is falling after 1 year? This is not acceptable, isn't it? Now, what interests me in this survey is the reason why we have a failure. And constantly, the reason is the same. In 50% of the case of failure, the reason is due to the fact that the requirements were incomplete, they were inconsistent, they were not sufficient to develop a system which is matching the needs of the people using the system in the campaign. So it's a very important result for us, for the community of requirement engineering. You can see the last statistic which I give to you on this slide, and is going in the same direction even more. They claim here that 60% of the failure are due to the fact that we have not understood the requirement for developing the system. So we are quite good in designing a very performant technical system, but we are not so good in understanding what this system that we are planning to build. This relationship between the quality of the end product, which is a software system, and the requirement has been mentioned many years ago. Look, my first reference is 76, which means already at that period it was observed that we should be conscious of the fact that if we don't do requirement engineering well, then we have no chance to get a good software system at the end. The second one is from Barry Beam, which I suppose many of you know. He was for a long time the director of the Software Institute in the United States. He invented many of these things we are using in project management, like the COCOMO method, the spiral model, the win-win model, and so on. So one of the things Barry Beam did was to evaluate the cost of a mistake that you have left in the code, okay? So the cost of repairing this mistake, if the software has been implemented, is 200 times the price that you have to pay if you can recognize this mistake at the level of requirement engineering. And the last one is a guy I like very much because this is a guy working, he was a director of a big project in the Mesa, and of course some of this project failed, and we did a very, very deep analysis of the reason why this project failed, and it ended up with the conclusion I gave to you already, is the fact that we have to be more careful about the requirement. In that precise case, he identified the fact that the requirement for the interface of this system were not predicted very well. So in consequence, the software failed. So the conclusion of this prefacing something is that in order to improve this situation, to address this problem, I think we need to elicit. This is a verb which I will use because this is a term which is normally used to expressing the fact that we have to discover the requirement. I will come again to this idea of discovery. The specification, the negotiation, and the validation of the requirement. We must address the problem of doing that in a more focused and systematic manner. And in some sense, the entire requirement engineering community has been, has emerged in order to deal with this challenge. So let me have 2-3 slides before entering in the detail to continue again this history and trying to give you a message about what is requirement engineering. So I start with the citation of Brooks, the guy I mentioned before, which I like very much because this citation is saying, which I believe, is that the most difficult part when we have to design a software system is in fact to understand what is the system that we have to design. In other words, what are the requirements which will determine what the system will be. So we can try to understand through the next 3 slides why it is so difficult to understand the requirement. Why are we making years after years so many mistakes and we end up with a requirement document which is not the one that should be done. So I start with a kind of definition which I recommend, saying that requirement engineering is the activity which transforms a fuzzy expression of stakeholders' need into a precise specification of requirements that shape the system to be built, and of course for this reason establish a link between the real world, the organizational world, and the system, so the system and its environment. Through this definition I can point out first things which is this idea of fuzzy expression of needs. Okay, sometime in some book of methodology people say, oh, it's very easy, you go and ask the end user to give you their needs and their wishes, okay, and you will get the requirement to shape the system. Of course this is completely false. The users, none of the stakeholders is knowing what they want. If you go large survey among a large set of stakeholders, you will have completely contradictory information. So I think this is the first mistake, which has been propagated in books, because a student, myself, I did that 20 years ago, I gave, a statement about the problem and say, develop for me a conceptual specification based on this statement. And the mistake is that after in the company, people believe they can trust this statement. Of course you cannot. I can give you stories and stories of a real life project where maybe I keep 10% of this initial document. Sometimes it can be 50%, but sometimes it's 0. Because the guy who has been writing the document, first of all, is giving you the ideas of a solution. So of course if you implement this solution, you have no chance to get the right solution. If you ask another people, he will ask you for something else which is different. So be careful about that, please. And this is related to this idea of felicitation of requirement that you have in all the requirement engineering methodology, saying requirement, they are not given. Even if you have a document, if you have a schema, if you have a plenty of sources, they are only source. And be careful about the fact that requirement, they have to be elicited through a process which is a participative process. If not, you will go in this trap that you develop a system which satisfies one of your stakeholders and make unhappy all the other one. And finally, they don't want this system, you will have to put in the trash. And some billion of dollars will go in the fly. Okay? The second aspect of this definition, which I can use, is this idea of stakeholder. Stakeholder, it's a generic term, which is literally saying all the people for whom the information system or the software system is a state. This is a very good definition that you have to have in mind. Because again, in many of the books, people are telling you, go and interview end users. End user is part of the population of stakeholder. But you have many other people that you have to interview. In particular, the top, the boss of the company, in many situations, you have to understand what is the strategy of the company, in which kind of strategy the information system will work, and the relationship with this strategy. If you don't go to visit this boss or the second level executive managers, these people will never manipulate the information system or the software system probably, but they have an idea about what is important as a requirement for this system, okay? So be careful, don't concentrate only on end user. This poor guy, they are very good in telling you how they will have to, if they would like to interact with the system, but they have no idea what is the purpose in the company that the system will serve. And this is very important to get a majority of people working on the data provided by this system to be happy at the end, okay? So I think it's enough for that one. The second slide which I use is something maybe that you know, they probably know, Judith, this framework, which is a framework to explaining in very general terms what is a change. What I want to say with this slide is one of the difficulties of requirement engineering is that you are placed in a change situation. And many people don't like to change. They are happy to talk about the change, but the moment they are involved with the change, they are not happy at all. So this is an inherent difficulty of requirement engineering. Now what this framework is saying, if you look horizontally, is saying that the change is a move from a situation, which is the existing situation, called the as is the situation, to a situation which is the next situation, the forecast situation, the future situation, the to-be situation. And vertically, the relationship is saying that, of course, the change is occurring on some existing system, real system, but you never perform it directly at that level. You have to think about the change, and for that, you need models, okay? So in our case, the as-is model and the to-be model will be requirements model, and the change consists of moving from the as-is situation to the to-be situation. And again, I put a note for myself here saying, take the Kennedy example. You remember Kennedy saying, I want an American to walk on the moon in the next 10 years. So this is typical for me for a project of requirement engineering. You have to start with a very high level mission. And this is necessary to try to avoid a number of mistakes. You have to understand, okay? Today, when I do consultancy, what people are asking me, Colette, I want to increase the number of passengers on my airport by 15%. I want to transform the information system to control the flow of train and passenger in train because I want to increase security. You see, this is where people start with. In a statement about the problem, they will explain you what are the trains, how they work, what is the track, and so on and so on. But they will never tell you that the main thing on which you have to focus for defining the new information system is this notion of security. Okay? So the last slide to explain the difficulty about requirement engineering, this notion of mismatch. Many people have been writing about this mismatch of languages, which mean mismatch means it does not match. Means there is a divergence between my language and your language. So we have difficulty to communicate. So this is inherent again to requirement engineering, because you and me, we are in this box on the right bottom here. We are people who are used to manipulate class diagram, use case diagram, and sequence diagram, and so on. What it means. When we are talking about the system, first of all, we are talking about one solution. Whereas there are many possible set of requirements. So this is the first thing we are making wrong, because we try to focus to the solution. Of course, every student in the class is saying, Madame, this solution is the best. Why it is the best? Of course, he has difficulty to explain. But what I mean is that we are focusing on one solution, instead of reasoning about different solutions that are maybe possible. Okay? The second thing is that we have a very technical language, and it is focusing on what the system has to do, it means on the function of the system. And third, it's quite a detail. It's a low-level description. Any conceptual specification of a reasonable system is about what? 70, 80, 100 pages. This is too much for these people who are on the left corner on the top to understand, you see? So on the other side, these people, they are used to talk in terms of goal, of objective. I want to increase that, I want to decrease that, I want, etc. So they are talking a different language. They are talking about a general language. It's not a detailed language. They are talking at a high-level description of what the system could be. And they have this notion of multiple viewpoints. Because it's, again, inherent of managers. If you ask two managers, they are used to consider different views. Maybe we can go that way, we can go that way. So there is a mismatch between the two. You know, in one of the last European projects we have been involved, my lab has been involved, we did a survey in companies, and we were asking what kind of language they would like the requirement to be expressing. Do you accept UML notation? The result was terrible, because 100 of them said, no, we don't want anymore to discuss requirement with the UML diagram. Okay, you have to have something else. And the conclusion, which I am trying to show on this slide, is that I think the requirement engineering community has been trying to make this effort to find a way to express the requirement, which is not anymore the usual specification that you know and I know, which is something more concise, more short, that can be produced shortly than the entire specification. But most of it, this expression will be trying to match the language of the environmental people, so the organization people. It means we are making the effort to project what we are used to formulate, which is a specification of even conceptual specification of the system in terms that people in a company can understand, which is meaning the goal that this functionality can support, and goal they can understand what it means, okay? So we will also very quickly see that requirements are expressed using natural language and nothing else. So today is something which is well accepted. The requirement document will be expressed in natural language. Okay. So I come to the end of this small introduction to the discipline, which is finally what we have been doing before. It's focusing on the specification of the system, which is meaning focusing on what the system has to do, and maybe the mistake, which I think you can infer from what I have said before, the mistake is that before defining the word, before defining the specification, the functionality of the system, we should understand better why this organization is needing this information system. We have to understand better the purpose of this information system. And this is really, today, I think, the underlying paradigm of all the approaches in the requirement engineering, is that you should have a better balance between these two questions. First of all, I have to understand why we need this system. And secondly, I can infer from understanding the reason, raison d'être, as we said in French, which is also English, by the way, the raison d'être du system. And then, if I understand properly that, then I can make a specification, I can reply to the whole question in a better focused manner. Okay, what I wanted to say here is that we have a very seminal paper, a definition of requirement engineering in '77, which was already saying that we should first understand why we need this system and then focus on what functionality can respond to the need of these people. But during almost 20 years, nothing had happened in this community. Okay, so if I summarize what I said, and this paradigm which is under the approach of requirement engineering, is this idea that requirement engineering is a process which has to start with this why question. What the why question means? Of course, you understand, if I want to understand the rhythm, the raison d'être of the system, I have to understand the objective of the organization. I have to understand the goal, including maybe some very strategic goal, like the one I mentioned before about the SNCF in France. I want to transport my passengers securely. This is one response to the why. I understand that these people are very focusing on the fact that what they want to improve with the system, the new generation of the information system, is to limit the number of train accidents during a certain period of time. Okay? And then, of course, this very high strategic goal will help me understand what are the requirements of the system. For instance, in the case of the example I just took about the train transportation, if I understand, at least intuitively, if I decompose this strategic goal into sub-goal and so on, then I will come across, for instance, a requirement like when the train is moving, then the door must remain closed. Okay? This will be a requirement for the development of my system. Maybe I would have missed this requirement, important one, if I had a different angle to make the specification of my system. Okay, so in some sense, the requirement engineering process, it's a goal transformation. It's transforming high-level goal into requirement, and assuming that if you do that, any requirement will ensure that the top-level goal, the strategic goal, is satisfied with the system. And of course, you can hope that the system that you develop will be more fitting the needs of the stakeholder, because of course all this process, which I call here the operationalization process of goal, it's made in a participative manner with all the stakeholders and you. We will see together a little bit later that in this process we are called the facilitator. It means we are not doing so much, we are just facilitating the work of going from the strategic top-level goal these requirements which are directly related to the stakeholder needs. Also, the last point I want to mention here is that during this process you understand what is a goal. I will enter more detail after that, but if I have a goal, I know that I have different ways to attain the goal, and I have also a way to not attain the goal, to fail in the fulfilling of the goal. And this will be part of the process. In contradiction to what we are doing normally when we do conceptual modeling, you know, we put classes there in the diagram, and we don't ask us so much if it is necessary to get this class. The example I have at the end, it's a hotel reservation system. Huh? If I give you the initial statement, I know what most of the students will do. Class diagram, madam, I have hotel and room, because it is obvious that an hotel is made of room. But assume that the group of hotels for which I am doing this work, it's placed in, let's say, Merida. It's a very touristic place. All the hotels are always full because there are so many tourists coming there that you don't have to advertise so much, to make so much effort, because anyway the hotels are full. There is no question about making the customer loyal to you, because you have enough customer anyway. Suppose this condition is the true one. I will understand by asking on the top the white question this kind of situation. Then I don't need the classroom, because the only thing I want is to produce a booking confirming the request of my customer with the lowest cost as possible and the lowest service. So I don't need the room, because I can handle the availability of room by a number of rooms for each hotel. So I don't need to represent all the room, you see? Vice versa. If this owner of hotel are telling me, oh madam, we have the conviction that to make our business, so we need the same person to come again in the same hotel or the hotel of the chain. It means you are on a line which is getting the customer loyal to you. You want to influence the loyalty of people. What is loyalty? One of the tricks for getting people loyal to you is that you personalize the system, the service you are providing to them, okay? In that case, personalizing the service, customizing the service, what it means, for instance, giving the same room to the same people who came 10 years ago, like I did 10 years ago. I was so happy in my room that I will be very happy if the owner of the hotel is giving me exactly the same room. Of course, you understand my point. In this case, in my class diagram, it is very important to have the classroom and to store in my database all the information about all the room possible of possible hotel in my chain. Okay, so you understand this dependency and how, you know, not asking the right question can push you to one solution, which by chance can be in coincidence with what people do or what people want, but we may be also completely against, and then you will go to failure. Okay? So you recognize this here, what I call initially in the first slide, the goal approaches, goal-oriented requirement engineering, on which I would like to focus in this presentation. But before that, you understand also that we, in this kind of approach, we introduce a new deliverable, which is a requirement document, which is not the initial statement that you are getting in any project, which is a document stating all the requirements that you will use to make the design of the system. So I would like to spend first a little bit of time on this notion of requirement, and again maybe introduce some slides about the requirement engineering process, and then I will move to the goal-oriented approaches. Do you have questions? Don't tell me I'm so clear that you... I am not too much against your views.
¿Cómo relaciona el why con el qué?
El qué.
Y la otra pregunta es la relación que habría entre why y modelado de procesos.
Sí. Okay. I use English. The relationship between the why, which are, you understand, goal, and maybe strategic goal, and requirement, I will deal with some example in the second part, so it's better to look at that. And with the business process, the response is more complicated, because some people will say that instead of reasoning about goal, you could reason with the business existing processes, the foreseen processes, and so on, okay? Which I will try to explain why I don't believe it's so interesting to do. You know, one reason that when you are dealing with a very complex and large project, business process modeling today is very much focusing on detail. And you cannot understand this. It's impossible. So the good thing about the goal, which I will introduce in the definition of the goal, is that it's more abstract. Of course, you are losing detail, which sometimes are very important. But I think they are not so much important for that kind of reasoning which I am doing. Okay? Vice versa, you can do a goal approach to identify what is a process you need for the future. And we have been doing, including with the CELMIN in one of these projects, Electra, the group we were more closely working with a Greek company was not doing that, but the other group was interested to identify or to define, to model what will be the next processes for the company. But we do this goal modeling, and at the end of it, the requirements were used to model the business processes. Not to model the system, but to model the business processes. Okay? So maybe I should look to the time. I'm talking too much, I think. 1 hour, so I have to go fast on that. It's not very important, but it is. Okay. Let me start with the definition of what is a requirement. In fact, we have 3 of them here. One is, I like it, it's a couple, Robertson, and these are big people who are making a lot of money on requirement engineering. They are consultants. She is British and he is Australian, so you understand they can cover the world very easily. And the definition in the book they have, I recommend this book. If you want something very practical, it's a book I can recommend, because these people have this interesting particularity that they have a lot of experience because this is their job, but at the same time they remain very close to the research in this community, and then anytime they see something interesting, then they adapt the things to their methodology. Okay? So the definition is very simple. A requirement is something about the product that you want to develop, or a quality that the product must have. So already this definition introduced what will be just after in the next slide, this distinction between functional requirement, what the product must do, and the quality it must have, which is a non-functional aspect of it. Okay? At the same time, it is a definition which can be applied to any product, for instance, a business process model, and not necessarily for a software system like I consider it here. The second one is just a little bit expanding the same thing. And the third one, I put it here because you can recognize the requirements specify how the goal should be accomplished by a proposed system. It means that this definition makes the link between a requirement and the goal. Anytime you have a requirement, you must, as a requirement engineer, be able to tell what is the goal this requirement helps to serve. Okay? So these are some examples. I will skip a bit here. And this taxonomy, which is important, I have no time to enter into it because it becomes a bit complicated very quickly. But it's important to at least remember that when talking about requirement, you have these two classes. The functional requirement, which are dealing with what the system is supposed to be in the future, and the non-functional requirement, which are dealing with the quality of the system. So you know performance, confidentiality, security will be non-functional requirement. I have here a very simple example saying I want to send Christmas card to my loyal customer, old customer, and I want them to be printed in color. The fact that they are printed in color in a non-functional aspect of this requirement, which is of course a functional one because you have to send Christmas cards every year. So I have no time to develop that, but it is very important when you are doing requirement engineering to consider both classes. I prefer to concentrate on this aspect, which is first of all what I said before, a requirement today is expressed in natural language, okay? Of course it's a short sentence, typically it's a sentence which is starting by the system shall. This is an example, the system shall keep track of loyal customer, okay? So this is a typical expression of a requirement in this type. What I have to say about this expression, two things. First of all, the requirement is more, how to say, abstract, is more general than any small function that you will have to put in the specification, okay? So it means vice versa, what I wrote here, that the requirement leaves a certain freedom to the engineer that will have to make the specification of the system. For instance, if I take this very simple example, I said the system must keep track of loyal customers. I didn't say that I want a specialization of the class customer to enter the loyal customer. I didn't say that you can use an attribute and the value will say if the customer is a loyal or not, okay? So you must place your requirement at a level which is more concise than what you will have in the specification. This is why instead of the 70 pages, for instance, of the specification that I mentioned before, you will end up with 1 page, maximum 2 pages of requirement. You understand also it is very interesting because you shorten the process by which you can tell to your stakeholder how you envision the system to work. The second aspect, which is the most difficult for people involved in engineering schools, is that any requirement must reflect a goal. And you know, you remember, I said the goal, I have always several ways to achieve the goal. It means that the requirement is always reflecting which one of the possible paths you have been selecting. It is reflecting a choice, okay? When I say here, I want to keep track of my loyal customer, it reflects the fact that probably in this goal operationalization process, we have been discussing if getting loyalty is important for this company or not. And the conclusion has been yes. It is important to make a customer loyal because these people have some experience probably, and they are convinced that through loyalty they can make more business than if they were not having influencing the loyalty of their customer. So it's reflecting this decision, of course. people could have been taking the reverse decision, and then the requirement would have been different, because it would have just said the system has to keep track information about customer, nothing else. Okay? So there is a kind of double facet of a requirement, which is very important to understand. At the same time, makes the exercise not so easy to do. One is this notion of reflecting some strategic or less strategic goal, some policy of the company, and at the end some choices they have made about the role that the system can play for achieving this goal. And then of course the second part, which is more easy for you to understand, which is the fact that you don't have to enter in all the detail, because you can leave this detail. They have no strategic influence, you see? So you can leave this detail for the face of the specification. If you have to print a receipt, it can be that there is no so much importance of knowing at that stage exactly the value that you will print on the receipt. Okay? So this is what I wanted to say about the requirement. I can take some of the requirement of this example. I think we don't have the time to do this exercise, because I would like to focus on the goal approach, but let me just take some examples. So you had the time to read, which is, I would like to have some requirement about the system, which is dealing with the reservation for an airline company and the ticket issue, which correspond to this booking. Okay, so these are examples of requirement. Number one, Air 1 under air booking request automatically. This is an expression of the requirement. I want this system to transform automatically a request into a booking. Okay. And you have sub-requirement. This is about the only structure you will find in the requirement document. It's very simple. Huh? It's very simple. It's just a list of requirements with sometimes this hierarchical view, which is saying, do you read, generating a candidate booking which is matching the request, or offering the wait list for the request, or offering alternative similar bookings. So if I discuss the reason why, somewhere, where do I have it? Here. Why we end up with this requirement? Can we imagine why we end up with this requirement? Because probably we discuss with the stakeholder what they would like to do. The strategic goal is to fill in the plane as much as possible. Now, so if they want to fill in the plane as much as possible, this system, which has a stupid function to execute, which is basically I take a request. If I have the availability, I say yes. If I don't have the ability, I say no. This is too simple. If I want to influence a little bit the process of achieving this goal, then I can give to the system functionality which I didn't imagine initially, which is in addition to, you remember, sub-requirement 1, which is the obvious one. I can imagine, oh, something more interesting if the guy wants to move from Merida to Caracas tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Of course, maybe I can say, sir, I have a possibility for you to leave at 12 o'clock. In some situation, Caracas is not so nice. Why you don't go to the sea and da. You know the story about marketing. It works. So this is why I have introduced a sub-requirement here, which is number 3. I want to this system to become a little bit intelligent in the sense that he will try to push the decision of the customer toward the satisfaction of the goal. Okay? And the waiting list, it's about the same. Okay, generate a ticket on demand. This is this is maybe evident. Cancel the two cancelable rules, which are requirements. I put these two examples because they just reflect business rule, no? Business rule, but if we backtrack a little bit later in the life of airline company, you know, initially they were letting you have several bookings for the same trip. I don't know how it is in Venezuela, but in France now it's almost impossible. Depending on the booking, you have 24 hours, 72 hours. You can have 1 week if you book your ticket very long in advance. Of course, the reason of this business rule is always the same, that because these people in company, they have a tremendous problem. If the plane is not going full, then they are losing money. So they do everything for trying this, you know, to fill in the plane. And they are asking you, requirement engineer, to help them. This is why this business rule, I have been doing that myself with Air France company, some of these two rules, just reasoning about how to increase the number of passengers in the plane. This was a starting point, okay? So I can skip that. The rest, and the description of requirement, just to tell you that there are tools that support you in documenting this requirement list. I don't know, you have these two probably here, because Requisite Pro and DOORS, which are the two ones really used in Europe, they have been bought by IBM. So now they belong to the suite of case tool of IBM. Okay? So maybe I skip, because I have been speaking too much initially. I will come back to these two slides if I have some time at the end. I wanted to discuss some aspect of the requirement engineering process, which I am not emphasizing. I am emphasizing anticipation, and there is another one which is very important, which is negotiation. So if we have 5 minutes, I can come back at the end to this idea of negotiation. Let me move to the goal approaches. And look a little bit more in detail what you can find in the literature to under this transformation of very high-level goal into requirement. So I put in a text here what I've said already, just to fix the idea. So goal-oriented analysis focus on what we call sometimes the early requirement, the one which are related to the problem and the stakeholder of this problem. When the stakeholder needs are identified, and of course alternative solutions are explored and evaluated. So during goal analysis, you start with an initial stakeholder goal. So it can be something almost operational, fulfill every book request in a library system, for instance. It can be schedule meeting if you want to develop a meeting scheduler. It can be a more strategic goal, like the one I mentioned before. And then, of course, you will keep refining all these goals in order to obtain the late requirement, which will support the specification of the systems. So everything in this goal-oriented approach is based on the notion of goal. They play a very important role. And don't believe it's a panacea. It's not always very easy to work with goal. But we have already returned on this investment, showing that this goal-oriented approach are successful in the sense that the success story are more important than before. Okay, so we start having evidence that the fact that this kind of approach can have a good return for you. So let me start with the definition of a goal and then some characteristics of goals which are important in this kind of process. So what is a goal? What is a goal? Do you have a goal? You have a goal? You are hungry? You would like to eat something? I want to become rich. This is a goal. And you know, a goal is what is intellectually called an optative statement. It means it projects in the future. Sometimes you can associate to a goal a state in which in the future you would like to be. More precisely, in general, you have several possible states in which you can be to say that the goal has been achieved. Optative contains also the fact that you will never become rich. Maybe you will never succeed in becoming rich. Okay? So optative means it includes the notion of a failure. I can fail. I want my plane to be full, but I cannot be so. You're always successful every time. Okay? So this is, of course, very interesting for us. Obviously, it is an expression of intention, of intents that people can have in their mind. Why it is useful in requirement engineering? So it's a kind of response I give to you, Jonas, previously, the fact that I think sometimes the problem you have to solve are so important. Yeah, that you have to identify the level of abstraction at which you can solve it. And if you make a mistake on the level of abstraction, it could be that you will never solve the problem. And I take a counter example that Judith and Selmin here know well, because it is a European project in which we have been, the three of us, involved together. And the project was on electricity management, production and distribution, some 10 years ago or so, at a period where the European community decided that all this monopolistic situation that the electricity producer and distributor were having were not acceptable, and that they have to enter in competition. Okay? So of course all these companies like EDF in France or the company we were working with in Greece called the PPC had to go through a tremendous change. And we were there to help them doing this kind of change. So we enter in a company where when I ask what is the documentation about how you do things, you can provide it to me, you know, you guess what they gave me. The schema of the database for printing the invoices of consumption of electricity, nothing else. So we decided to model business processes. We did, I said 175, maybe it was 182, I forgot the exact number. The result is that we were having something like 1 cubic meter of paper of these models, you know. We did that on 6 months with plenty of people. We were a big team modeling business process. It's very easy to model business process because you listen to people, you can do it by heart immediately. But nevertheless, then of course this guy, I am the elder, so they said, Colette, you have to find a solution. Well, how we can recommend these people to do about their change? And then I realized 1 cubic meter of paper. I cannot handle a process of change with 1 cubic meter of paper. It's just not possible, you understand? So I wanted to emphasize this aspect because I think it's very important for people like you. You are starting this, your studies in engineering. You need to make models, and the most difficult aspect is to find the right model for the problem you have to solve. And here, the difficulty is the level of abstraction. Then we decided to move to goals, and we transformed this 1 cubic meter of paper in 1 sheet of paper, every sheet of paper. where the hierarchy of goals, starting from the low-level goal associated to every process, and the top-level goal of the company were represented. I went with this sheet of paper under my arm, going through the different places in Europe, and it was very easy to discuss and to communicate with all these people only with the hierarchy of goal. Okay? So this is a positive, one positive aspect of goal. Okay, the second one is that, you remember I mentioned that requirements have to be functional and non-functional. They don't come like that from the fly. They come from the fact that in the goal you have also this distinction, the functional goal and the non-functional goal. Okay? So I have only 2 slides at the end of the presentation of the non-functional goal. Again, I do not have the time to enter in this, but it is very important to reason about the functional and the non-functional. So the functional are dealing with what the system has to do. So if I want an ubiquitous cash service to be provided, this is a functional goal. If I want the service to the customer to be done quickly, this is a non-functional goal. If I want the window bringing information to my people to be pop up in less than half a second, this is a non-functional goal. It's not easy to work with a non-functional goal, but you will see at the end of the presentation that the technique I will present first for the functional goal can also be applied to the non-functional goal. Another property that a goal can be expressed at different levels of abstraction. But of course, you understand the utility of that, given this process by which you move from very high-level strategic goal to operationalizable goal. So, for instance, this is a concrete case where people initially want us to increase the number of contracts by 20%. Okay? It was a financial branch of Renault, I can give the name, it doesn't matter. And this company, well, the financial branch, which initially was created just because Renault wanted to be nice with their client, and when they were not having the money, then they were giving loans, you know. And they end up with the financial branch, which of course was not making enough money, enough business, so they said, okay, we have to do something. So we start with this top level goal. We have at least to survive to increase the number of loan contracts by 20%. So when you go down, one decomposition of this goal, one sub-goal, if you prefer, is you think about the fact that they were looking only to the customer that were buying a car, a Renault car. So you say, okay, I should diversify the number of ways by which I can make this offering of loan for buying cars. And then the third level is giving you a number of examples of this way by which you can diversify the channel by which you can hope to sell. Okay? So you can have a high-level goal. The typical aspect of strategic goal that it covers the entire company. You know, the scope is large. Whereas when you go down to more specific goal, more close to the operationalization of the goal, then you are closer to tactics. The example here can be called tactics that you give to these people, and of course they become design specific. Okay, so of course this is a way by which you can help people to make a kind of alignment between the strategy, the different tactics, and the operationalization of this tactic. So if you think about the information or software system development, this requirement will help you make the specification of the system, but you can use it for business process modeling. I have the requirement about my business processes, and I will implement them having this property, may be satisfied more easily. Then the other property, which is probably the most important, is that you will construct goal models that are based on the AND or logical mechanism that you know. Okay, so this AND or mechanism are providing the way by which you can support this reasoning of going from strategic goal to operationalized goal. So the AND decomposition is what you can suspect. If I do AND decomposition like this one, the father goal is manage lending book. If I have done this AND decomposition, if I assume that this decomposition is complete, it means that if every sub-goal is achieved, then the father goal will be achieved. Okay? So this is what you will use to move from a top-level goal to more refined goal. And of course, you can repeat this AND decomposition as many times as you want. It is also very important in this process to use the OR. Sometimes O is called the refinement, and AND is associated with the decomposition of the goal. So the refinement means, if I have an OR refinement, then it means that is one of the children, of the child goal, of the sub-goal is satisfied, then I can assume that the father goal is satisfied. It means it's an XOR, it's an exclusive OR decomposition if you want so. So sometimes people don't like too much to use the exclusive OR, so they accept to use inclusive OR, which you can understand is introducing multiply the number of scenarios for the implementation that you have to do. But okay, so the key, the core aspect of a goal model, it's this kind of goal hierarchy, which is illustrated here. So most of the time it is not a hierarchy because the same goal can be the sum of several father goals. So it's in fact more a graph than a tree, than a hierarchy. Another aspect when you do this work, which is interesting, is that you can introduce conflicting goals. Okay? When again you make this analysis of failure, you discover that often many points of disagreement of the people who are looking to the implementation of the system is that they are positioned in conflict. But you never realized that they were in conflict. And the conflict is realized by the execution of the system. And then it is a fight. Okay? So in fact, it's typical for a requirement engineer to try to make this conflict explicit as soon as possible when you model this kind of goal tree. So in this example, I got a conflict between provide a long borrowing period and maintain regular availability. Provide a long borrowing period is one sub-goal of satisfied customer request. To satisfy customer request, I would like, of course, if I ask the requester, if I ask a student, when you go to the library, you would like to have the book for the entire semester. No, maybe the year. You want a long borrowing period. But now when I say satisfied book request, and I ask the librarian how to do that, of course he's saying maintain as many copies as possible. This happened to me only once in Dubai. In Dubai, stupid Colette, who is looking for the money, expense of money, saying, okay. He said, money is not a problem. You want 1,000 books, you buy 1,000 books. So this is why I have this alternative. Okay, I can maintain as many copies as possible, but for that I need a big budget. So sometimes in Europe we don't have enough money at all. So you have to maintain a regular availability. It means that you have to reduce the delay of lending a book to a person. So these two goals are in conflict, and it will help you resolve this conflict at a level where it is not expensive to do it. Okay? So this is another example where you find most of the things I have introduced before. So my top level goal is to schedule a meeting. I am here in a problem where I've been asking to develop a meeting scheduler. And then the first decomposition is based on the observation that when you want to schedule a meeting, the main problem, of course, is to solve these so many constraints that the different people, different rooms, and so on, as providing to you. So the decomposition is I have to collect this constraint, particularly the one timetable, and then I have to choose or to produce a schedule. I can do it manually. I can do it automatically, for instance, using a constraint solver, something like that. Okay, I don't want to detail, but I want to just to show you the importance of the OR decomposition, because with what I have here, 2 by 2, means I have 4 possibilities to collect a timetable. In this reasoning, I introduced not only 1 possibility, but 4 possibilities. And then, of course, I will have to negotiate with the stakeholder, which is the one they believe it's most adequate for them. Okay? And today, you know, the new tendency for developing software product is to develop product line. You are familiar with product line? Not at that point. They will come a little bit later. So, in fact, to develop not the software that the company is asking you, but to develop a family of similar systems that you can customize depending of your customer. So it means, if I project this view of software engineering to the goal model, that instead of deciding about which of the alternative you select, you will keep all of them. Of course, putting very clearly a mark that here I have 2 choices, here I have 2 other choices, and so on. Okay? At the bottom, the leaves of this tree correspond to requirements. Here, instead of putting a requirement, I put a task to give you the opportunity to ask the question about how I can use a goal decomposition. Okay? So it's more clear now that you have some technique. Of course, this one is not the only one. This is a basic one. Okay? If I consider all these 3, 5, 6 methods which are existing in the literature, and I try to summarize what are the key aspects, I get something like what I have presented to you. So you can find many variations, but this is a core. I have to check the time. It's okay. I've been very fast. So the next point I wanted to at least tackle a little bit with you was the methodology or the way you can construct such a graph. Okay, it's the hierarchical nature of the tree is probably suggesting to you that you have to perform this construction top-down, which is not good, okay? Never do it completely top-down. It's not a good way to do it completely top-down. It's better to do it balancing top-down and bottom-up. So I will try to explain this with this slide where I have taken again the framework for change, which I introduced at at the beginning of the talk, and of course the model I am considering is our goal model, the ASIS model, and the 2D model. So our question is to build the 2D model, how to proceed in order to build the 2D model. So of course, most of the time you need to know the ASIS model. Not all companies have ASIS model, goal model, okay? So sometimes you have to do it, like we did in Electra. You have to abstract from, for instance, the business process models, what is the current goal model. So in some sense, what are the goals that the company today, by its operation, is trying to achieve. So this is one support. It's one support because, of course, when you do this thing, you encounter some problem, you encounter some bottlenecks and deficiencies, and then you can use this negative aspect of what you are observed as to set the goal for the future. So you can identify 2D goals by just reversing the problem that you are observing in the ASIS situation. Then, of course, you have to understand the needs for change, the factor for change, which can come from an external, your environment, which is the case in the Electra project which I mentioned. It's a European community who decided to change the game, and you cannot do in another way. You have to follow the factors for change which are implied by the community. And of course, you have your own needs for change. For instance, in this project, it was very clear that when we asked the people, the employee of this company, we did some brainstorming with them. They were having plenty of goals they would like to achieve because they were not considering that the functioning was 100% perfect. So they had their own need for change. And of course, you can use other techniques which I have not mentioned, particularly scenarios that maybe you know with the use case kind of approach. Other technique to find the obstacle, a goal I want it to be achieved, but I can reason about the obstacle for not achieving my goal. So it's another technique that you can find in literature, and conflicts, which I mentioned. You can have more systematic technique to help you identifying the conflict. So the result of that is that sometimes, so what I recommend, you have a goal, you can systematically ask you why I have this goal. What is the reason for this goal? So you will go up till the point where it's so strategic that you cannot imagine another top level goal. Okay? So any moment you have a goal on your sheet of paper or your screen, you should do that. Why do we have this goal? And move to the strategic level. Vice versa. Any moment you have a goal, you should ask how I can achieve this goal. By which strategy or by which way I can achieve this goal. What are the sub-goals of this goal? What are the different alternatives to achieve this goal? Okay? So it means you will go top-down, because you go from a goal down to the implementation or the operationalization of the goal. Bottom-up, it's a why question. You have a goal. You ask why I need this goal. What is the return of this goal? Okay? For instance, in the reservation system, if you start with, I want to customize the service to my customer. I have this idea of customization of a service. I want to customize. So if you ask the why question, why do you want to customize? Customize in one way to get loyalty. So it means a top level goal will be getting loyalty, to get loyalty, to get a loyal customer, to influence the loyalty of the customer. If you go top down, then you are trying to investigate the different way by which you can customize the booking service to a person. So I can repeat the same reservation he got, offering the same room he got so many years ago, where he was so happy because I have a file saying that he was happy in this room. Or maybe I can try to get the preference of my customer and make an offer which is fitting the preference of this person. You see? So always it's important to go sometime bottom up, sometime top down. In fact, my recommendation will be to do systematically. For any goal you are discussing, you should go a little bit bottom up, a little bit top down. Okay? So I have to leave some time for questions, no? Okay. So I can finish this one. I have a long example, so I can give you the slides if you want. It's an example which I have elaborated to show how to construct in the room reservation case to construct this goal. So it's very pedagogically, or at least I try to do it. And I can give you the slide if you want, and you can reuse that. So I can conclude with coming back again to the functional and non-functional goal. Okay, this distinction. The distinction itself, it's no problem. Everybody recognizes the fact that we have functional goals. So sometimes they are called hard goals, and the non-functional goals which are called soft goals. The reason of this terminology is that hard goal, I want with my train to block the speed. I want to limit the speed of the train between two blocks. This is a hard goal, it's a functional goal. I want, when the train is moving, to keep the door closed. This is another example of a hard goal. So why they are called hard goal? Because you can have a measure, a matrix, which is giving you the measure if the goal is satisfied or not when the system is implemented. Okay? So you can check if the goal is satisfied in the implemented system or not, because you have a very strict quantitative measure of the satisfaction of this goal. Okay, so I want the speed to be the same in a block of the train. The train is 300 meters or something like that on the track. Then I can measure that very easily. The soft goals are a little bit different in the sense that I don't know. I want to serve my customer quickly. What is quickly? I cannot set a measure. I can maybe have a threshold. And based on satisfaction surveys or something like that, and if I am above the threshold, I can assume the goal is satisfied in 90% of the case or 80% of the case. And the threshold is not satisfied. But you see, I don't have a clear-cut measure of the satisfaction of the goal. And the people who introduced that, by the way, they brought that from economy, from a Nobel Prize in economy, who introduced goals to satisfy a goal, goal satisfaction, and to satisfy a goal, to make a change in the way of formulating, which is a goal satisfies. So you need the people, you see the people who are known in our community, John Milopoulos in particular, who use this distinction. Okay, now you have to deal with soft goal. So what I can tell you is, first of all, that you can use exactly the same technique, the M decomposition and the O refinement. with your soft goals. So here I use usability as an example. So I have an end decomposition, another end decomposition. Do I have another decomposition? I don't have, but I could have. Okay? You can use and or. Sometimes it's very difficult to make an end decomposition because you are not sure that you are complete. So you will introduce this influence. You see the plus, and we can have a minus. In this example I don't have, but the plus meaning use component is contributing positively to modularity. But the difference and modularity is participating to the satisfying of user flexibility. The difference between these two is that at least in my problem, user tailorability can be decomposed in user flexibility and programmability, and I'm sure of it, and this is a complete end decomposition. Here I am not sure that my decomposition is complete because I have only two. So I use this notion of influence, okay? So, adding this notion of influence, the conclusion will be the same. The leaf of the graph will give you the requirement or the task by which you can implement the non-functional requirement. So this is very useful because you can identify the technique that you want to implement in the system, and this technique becomes a functional requirement if you prefer, to satisfy the non-functional requirement. What I can add is that you can find in the literature, including in the web, a number of these decompositions. You don't have to do yourself. If you deal with the security, with the performance confidentiality, these are non-functional requirements which have been studied by many people. So you don't have this, to do this tricky thing. You have just to adapt to the problem on which you have to work. And my last slide on that, which is there is another use of the non-functional goal, so the soft goal, which is illustrated here, which is a way by which you can support the identification or the choice of the alternative that you have introduced in the hard graph. You remember the end decomposition and or decomposition. So this is again meeting scheduler. I have an or decomposition here manually and automatically. Which one is the best to be chosen for these people in your university? Huh? You want to have a meeting scheduler. What is the option? Which is the best? So instead of doing like that, then you can use a non-functional requirement and use again this notion of positive and negative influences, and looking how this hard solution contribute to the satisfaction of the non-functional goal. Okay? And of course, if you have one option, which is having only plus to the non-functional, you will probably select that one. If not, the game is a bit more complicated, but you understand it. Okay? So, this is a tricky part of goal. Non-functional goals are difficult to handle. Very soon you have a kind of spaghetti plate in front of you, and it's not easy. Okay, so this is a conclusion about goal. I have emphasized the idea of elicitation of requirement through goal modeling, which is one aspect, but goals have proved to be very important in other topic of requirement engineering, which you have in this list. I have just shown how non-functional goal can help you in the exploration of the different hard goal choices. Initially, goal models were introduced to check the completeness of a requirement document. The first time goal model have been introduced in literature, it was for this purpose. It's a guy called Yu with an U at the end. Requirement pre-traceability is something I have not introduced. I could have done it. But you can understand now, because when I have the top level goal and I have one requirement, I have a kind of traceability of this requirement. I can go through even the path from the requirement to the top level goal, and I understand exactly why this requirement is part of my requirement document. Conflict, I have mentioned. Documentation, of course, it's obvious because I can explain to my stakeholder much better than before the reason why I have the room class in my class diagram or I don't have it. Negotiation, which is a point I have no time to introduce. I can just say a word about it. Why we have negotiation? You think? I need to drink some water. Huh? At least one should come to your mind. If I have conflict, I have to negotiate. You know, conflict is binary. Huh? If I take this option, the other one will be unhappy. I cannot satisfy half of them. I have to decide, okay? So I have to negotiate. I need negotiation. Okay. Second thing for which we need negotiation is that it's good to ask to the stakeholder what they want, but maybe they want too much for the budget they give to you and the delay they give to you for the development. So you have to select. You have to prioritize the requirements. So again, at least you can remember that there are a number of negotiation techniques which help you prioritize requirements. It's not as simple as putting 1, 2, 3 as a priority. It's more sophisticated. For instance, it can be based on a ratio, which is the cost and the value of a requirement. You see, you calculate this ratio for every requirement, and then you can display the different requirements in a plan where you have this ratio apparent. Okay, so this is why we need negotiation. The slide I wanted to discuss to you is a slide which is saying the requirement engineering process. It's a process which is not going on one axis, which is the idea that we have most of the time, because most of the methodology tell you start with a document which is a fuzzy one and you end up with a formal specification. And this guy is saying, no, the requirement process is in a three-dimensional space. One of the space, the one of negotiation. It is idea that you can set for the same problem 100 requirement document. Okay, maybe not 100, but probably 20, 30, whatever. It's not useful that one, anyway. Huh? No, I don't need that.
Just in time.
Yes. No. Okay, so I can stop there because my coughing is coming, so after a while I will not be able to speak at all, but only cough. So thank you for your patience. It was a bit too long, 2 hours. We should have done a break in the middle. Okay, it's okay. They don't all sleep, but some start So I can respond to question.
Preguntas en español despacio, sin problema, que ella contesta en inglés. English, do you have questions? Yeah. Bueno. Adelante.
But in the process of the requirements engineering, I think that the hardest stage is the discovery of the requirement by itself. So it has been said multiple times that the main problem is that the clients or the stakeholders, as you will say, they don't really know what they want. So my personal point of view is that the main problem is that they know what they want, but they don't know how to express it in a natural language. So
I am not sure they know what they want, which is normal. They don't know what they want. And that I can give you 2 reasons which explain why they cannot know exactly what they want. First of all, because they don't know if this requirement or this goal is achievable through the system or not. They don't have a knowledge. Even if the literacy of these people is increasing about the IT system, you know? If I remember 20 years ago when I was going in a company, these people typically were saying, it's very fuzzy in our data, we want you to do a database and to make everything clear, you know? It was a question like that, do the way you want, it doesn't matter, I'm not interested by understanding. Today is completely different. Their literacy about IT is much higher. They know that they can take a profit of IT, and they want to try to control the way you are using IT to be sure that it is fitting what they want. But they don't know exactly if it is possible or not. This is one reason, you see. So it's a participative process by which we learn about their job and they learn about our job and implementation. So this is one of the reasons I believe today never accept a document when people say, we know exactly what we want, please develop, because this will be a failure. I can't tell you. Okay, let you finish.
So yeah, when we are interviewing our stakeholder and getting the requirements, we are like subconsciously making our own understanding of the process, you know, making our own abstraction of it. So we may like have new ideas, bringing new concepts of the problem. So by doing this, aren't we risking that we may give our stakeholder a new idea and then he turned it into something that was completely different to what he originally wanted, and you know the end product would be a failure, as you said. So is this really good, like suggest things, give new ideas in the requirement stage or not?
It's better if this idea comes from them, even if indirectly you have been the one providing this idea. Okay? So I really believe in a process which is a participative process. I can give the example of what was initially the practice of this EKD methodology that these two persons know very well. EKD was initiated in Sweden, and I participated in several EKD sessions. Typically we are 5. I am what they call the facilitator. I am not an engineer, I am the facilitator. And the 4 other ones are experts of the domain. So depending on the level of the goal you have to handle, it will be more operational people or more strategic people. And they do themselves this kind of graph which has been shown. For that we have a plastic, and we put plastic on the wall, and as much as they need. It's like this technique in marketing with post-it technique. So they have square of paper where green means goal, red means problem, and so on. They are modeling themselves. And of course you help them, you see? You help them because you said, okay, maybe these two goals are the same, do you want to merge them, this decomposition, do you think it is complete, and so on. But this is a process I prefer. Now, you have a good idea which is about creativity. So for that, it can be dependent on the problem. There are problems where these people need to be creative, and they are not necessarily creative by themselves. So if you look to literature and requirement engineering, some people, I can mention one, Neil Maiden in the City University in London, they have been developing this creative workshop, but the principle will be the same. We are here, we are bringing some new idea about how to emerge creative thinking. Like here you bring something which is this notion of God, decomposition of God, influence of God, but they do by themselves. You see, you cannot have 2 hearts, because if not, you get this twice instead of 1. So never do the job of the manager. This is very bad. You have to be very careful about it. So find a technique by which you help them, but don't come here and if we were doing that. When we are doing goal modeling, it happened to me, it depends on the relationship you have the people after a certain number of days of work. It can happen to me because this is my nature, I'm talking too much and so on, but sometimes it has positive aspects. You don't think we could have this alternative? And they will accept, but you have to be very careful. You see, because you are jumping in a domain where you are not expert. This is not your job. Huh?
The expert level has to do with that.
Yeah. So enrich the number, enrich your basket of techniques by which you can do what you would like to do. This is a recommendation I can make.
Sí. ¿Pueden los diagramas de meta, no diagrams, ser usados con los diagramas de casos de uso de UML o tú no lo recomiendas?
I have to make a response, short response to a question which is a long problem. But what I can say short, two things. First of all, remember where use cases are coming from. Ivar Jacobson is my friend. Huh? I know that guy for more than 35 years. And I know how he invented use case. Ivar Jacobson is an engineer. Database doesn't know what it is. Okay? It's a guy who has been programming all his life. Technical system for the telephone. Okay, he became a manager and so on. But remember that. So for him, use case became necessary the day this engine, this utility, this telephone were becoming so complex that he needed a little bit to figure out what will be on the interface. Okay? So use case historically have been invented to prefigure what will be the interface, the functionality accessible interface. And then it's my second point. It has been used in any way. There is stupid literature about it. There is stupid practice of human use case in Canada. Because they associate that with requirement engineering, which is wrong. Okay? It can be used in requirement engineering, but not exactly the way the use case model can be done. And one reason for that, in addition to the previous one I gave, is that use cases are functional. I mean, you are not going out of what I have said for 2 hours. Please go out of this attitude where you are engineer, you want to engineer things, and you are only focusing on the function. Please step back and look to the system. Ask people who can give you a position from outside to help you identify what has to be done in the system. Okay? So be careful with the use case. It can be a good instrument, the representation is very simple, and so on and so on. But don't mix the purpose. Using use case for requirement engineering and using use case for just, kind of pre-specification of interface are two things which are different. Huh? If you take the book of Ivar Jacobson, the example, the first example, which is about this recycling machine, we fought together. I said, look Ivar, you give an example of scenario. This example is full of mistake. If it was a student of mine, he will got a 0/20. It's full of big mistakes. So, and this is due with a misunderstanding. In his mind, it was not a misunderstanding. I want a scenario to tell me in simple terms what information you have to get there. Okay? I want to design my interface. So this is what I want to say.
La otra pregunta es, ¿dónde podemos conseguir más información bibliográfica sobre el método. Where can we find more bibliographic information about your method?
Well, I think the source of, the two key methods which are on the market today are cows, if you want, cows, which is from Louvain. You have a book, and you have also software too, which is called Objective. And this is a method which started from academia, but now it's something which is professionally used. Okay. Then of course you have the Robertson and Robertson, which I think it's a good method if you are a professional. If you are a professional. Now, if you are interested by understanding the problem, by understanding the research, then I would recommend to go to the Requirement Engineering Conference proceedings and the RFSQ conference now, because this was a satellite event which became a conference, and then you will get access to the important literature about it.
Is there any paper where we can find just the general methods? Any paper written by you?
Well, this is done from a pedagogical point of view.
Yeah.
No, it's not really my method. This is what I can teach sometimes for some people with a longer point of view. So I have a paper which is exactly following that. It is in French. It's one of the rare papers I wrote in French, so I can send it in French. It's the only one which is exactly following basically what I said here, which is a kind of, extended, it's a 3-day seminar which I give to students who start trying to understand requirement engineering. Because our methodology was combining goal and scenario. This is what we were used to manipulate.
Yo tengo una pregunta que complementa esto. La madurez organizacional maturity has something to do with the application of the method.
Maturity?
Organizational maturity.
CMM. Yeah.
It
You are even Somerville, who took the CMM level of maturity and translated it into requirement. It's another.
Non, mais quand j'ai dit maturity, c'est dans le sens the people have to recognize the important role.
Ah, yes. The company women. I think if you have to apply requirement engineering in a company, I mean, you have to explain what are the roles, what are the stakeholders, what are the role of the stakeholder. You have to provide some training, some skill training for people to do it properly. You need, for instance, if I compare my experience with DKD in Scandinavia. In Scandinavia, I never had any problem because immediately after 10 minutes, these people start working and between them, they are not used to have the time to discuss themselves the goal of their work, and they are very happy and it's very successful. When I tried to apply it in Greece, it was a complete failure. I have to change the mode of processing and then I reflect, it's trigger reflection on me, but it is true. Because in Scandinavia, people have, like in Japan, they are used to consensus, They work to find a consensus. Anytime you have to do this kind of model for finding the final consensus, they have immediately a kind of agreement. Whereas when you go in the south, Mediterranean south, is terrible, because the culture is hierarchical. And if you have two persons with a little bit difference in their level, second one is useless. Because and say, you are stupid, this is a solution, you cannot do anything. So the solution we found was to use a tool by which is anonymous. Huh? But even with an anonymous tool, sometimes you have to project the down to everybody. And the same. So I had to take the boss together with me, explain that maybe he has to change his attitude. So, terrible. So training is necessary.
Any other questions? Muchas gracias. Mañana, 10 de la mañana, la profesora Silvia nos va a hablar sobre gestión del proceso negocial, business process management.